Time now for the business news. I'm joined on set by Catherine Bennett. Catherine, we're going to start with Google receiving yet another slap on the wrist by Brussels, the EU competition watchdog.
That's right. So Google will be hit today by its biggest ever regulatory fine by the European Commission, which said that the search engine had favoured its own services over that of rivals in Android operating systems. The fine will reach several billions of euros, topping even the €2.4 billion charge the company received last year for pushing its own shopping services to the top of search results. Google says that it has done nothing wrong. This latest punishment is part of an 8-year antitrust battle with Brussels, which is trying to keep a lid on the firm's dominance in the European market, where it has more than 90% of market share.
Meanwhile, Catherine, you were looking at it already yesterday, but still more big deals coming out of that air show in the United Kingdom.
That's right. So in Farnborough, it looks like China is set to be the next big market in aviation, despite global trade tensions and rising oil prices. A report by Boeing has said that the country is going to overtake the US to become the main driver of sales in aircraft within the next 10 to 15 years. Thanks in part to this trade from China, sales over the next 20 years should reach $6.3 trillion. Boeing and Airbus have full order lists for years to come.
Let's stay in the United Kingdom for a while, and there's other industries that are working hard to prepare in the event of a no-deal Brexit.
Yes, which is looking increasingly likely. So British Pharma is battening down the hatches ahead of Britain leaving the EU next year. UK-based AstraZeneca has already spent £40 million on preparations. If the UK leaves, it also leaves the European Drugs Regulator, which is responsible for testing and licensing medicines. This means that any drugs going from the UK to Europe would first have to be authorised within the EU. And likewise, EU drugs could not be used in the UK without separate testing. As a result, AstraZeneca is increasing its stockpile of drugs by 20%, ready just in case the UK can't strike a deal. And now let's take a look at what the markets are doing. European indices are positive across the board, following on from Wall Street's highs after Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell gave a speech to Congress yesterday with a mostly upbeat assessment of the US economy. FTSE and CAC 40 up by 0.4%, and the DAX following soon after with an increase of 0.5%. Investors are going to be keeping a close eye on that Google fine, so we're likely to see some movement in shares for its parent company Alphabet over the course of the day. Asian stocks are mixed, Japan still leading the region, with the Nikkei up by just under 0.5%. The Shanghai Composite, Hang Seng Index and Kospi were all trending downwards. And the Cuban tourism industry has bounced back in June from a months-long slump, helped by increased visits from US cruise ships. Here's a report by Anke Uller.
Cruise ships have become a common sight at Havana's main port in recent years, carrying on board scores of American tourists despite diplomatic tensions between Cuba and the United States.
Tourism has increased quite a lot. There are many people coming in, especially on cruises. We get quite a few visits from cruise passengers, especially Americans.
In June, 68,000 American tourists visited Cuba, a 5% increase from the same month last year. Half of them arrived on cruise ships. The number of American tourists dropped by 25% for the first half of the year, due in part to the Trump administration's decision to tighten a trade embargo against Cuba late last year, restricting access to hotels, stores, and other businesses tied to the Cuban military. Cruise ships are the only way around the embargo, but many merchants say they're still not seeing any benefits from the increase in cruise passengers.
Cruise ships make an important contribution to the tourists that have entered the country. But, as I said, sometimes the problem with tourists is that they walk very fast because they have to keep a certain schedule, or the guide walks fast.
The drop in tourism revenue is painful for Cuba's communist-run government. The country is already struggling with declining export revenues and dwindling support from crisis-hit Venezuela.
Now, we already know that US President Donald Trump is a big spender, even as it turns out on Facebook. A new study has shown that Trump is the biggest political advertiser on the social network. Since May, Trump's team has spent $274,000 on ads. Money well spent, as they were also the ads the most seen by Facebook users, with 37 million people viewing the ads since May. And that wraps up the business news from me.
Thanks a lot, Catherine. Well, that wraps up indeed the business news, but also this edition. Do have a good day here on France 24.